I'm blaming my dad for the translation of this reading. God sets a desert bush on fire. Nothing unusual there, but Moses does a double take when he realises it's been going a good while, but not burning into a pile of ash. He goes over and thinks, weird, this needs checking out. God sees him coming closer and calls out, Moses, hold it right there. This is sacred sand. I want your shoes off and I want your head straight. I'm God, Abraham's God, Isaac's God, Jacob's God. Moses covers his face, scared witless at the prospect of looking God in the face. God says, I've got miles of footage of my people's rough time in Egypt. I've got weeks' worth of audio, groans of desperation through sleepless nights. It's echoing round my head and it's gutting me. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to liberate them. Move them out, all of them, into a land with lush fields, milk and honey on tap. Right now, it's being rented to the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. But my people have got through to me. I've got hard evidence. Their oppression is well documented. You're off to Pharaoh. Tell him to release them. Tell him they're leaving Egypt as of now. Moses isn't convinced. Who shall I say sent me? He stutters. God replies, I am who I am, and I will be who I will be. Tell them the I am sent you. Moses makes more excuses, plays on his stutter, but God works on him, promising spectacular special effects. Moses eventually agrees to go if someone else will speak for him. God suggests Moses' brother, Aaron. So Moses and Aaron get an appointment with Pharaoh and tell him, God says, my people, let them go. They've got tickets to a God fest in the desert. Pharaoh says, God who? Which God? Who's he think he is, expecting me to drop everything and lose my workforce? You're having a laugh. Out of spite, Pharaoh cuts straw supplies and Jewish labourers have to make bricks without straw, the same target rates of productivity as before, but with no straw, which is virtually impossible. Pharaoh gets off on their exhaustion, saying, lazy dogs, the lot of them. The people are naffed off with Moses and Aaron, and Moses tells God it's only made it worse.
Cara's final word as she got down is naffed off. As if to say, Dad, why did you ask me to do a reading out of that Bible? I don't know, it seemed like a good idea at the stage. You can all hear me, can you? Jeff can hear me? Interesting. Well, I don't know where Jeff is, but I think I get a wave, yes. I'll go. I had an interesting moment yesterday, walking around in town, and I was asked the question, oh, I know you from somewhere, don't I? And I said, I'm Maddie's dad. Oh, yes, that's where I know you from. And it felt as though I was going back to the school gates in somewhere. So before you today, you've got Maddie's dad, because Maddie is maybe better known for many of you in the congregation. I don't know why I quite chose a street Bible. Maybe because it's of all that's happening on the streets where Maddie is going to go to. Not the most pleasant of locations. But another thing for you, some of you may not know about Maddie's dad and Maddie's mum and Maddie's sister Cara, who did the reading. We were missionaries in Thailand ourselves, and we were missionaries in Pattaya, and came back home in 2000, 2001, and before Maddie was born, she was but a speck in God's eye, and now, all these years later, Maddie finds herself 2 days away from going back to the same city where her dad and mum and sister were serving. One little funny story about our Cara, which she may regret me saying, but I can always remember this one time. Supermarket aisle, and because Cara, well, she was a gorgeous little girl, but she had these cheeks that the Thai people used to love, and they would run down the supermarket aisle and they'd say muan tukata, which means like a doll. But when you say muan tukata, you've got to grab a hold of those cheeks and give them a good squeeze. And I can always remember this one occasion we're in the supermarket, and this Thai mama, sees Cara in her eyes, and Cara's going, "Meow, meow," which means, I don't want. She knows exactly what's coming up. Thank you, Ian, for allowing me to break the tradition. If you'd come for some Galatians today, I'm sorry, we're not in Galatians. Come back again next week, where I think we'll go back. And I have chosen this particular Exodus 3 passage because it is one of Maddie's favourite passages from this last few years. And I trust it may speak to all of us about the wonders of his calling on our lives. And as I was just preparing no, not yet, sorry, Steph, I'm too soon with my hands up. As I was preparing yesterday morning, I did just wonder if God may have laid it on my heart, these words, for some of us today. Don't be consumed with your thoughts, or the remorse, or the regret of any wasted years that may rob you of enjoying him now and receiving the expectation of all that is good to come. His blood, his cross, forgiveness are all there to draw a line under the past. Come and meet me this morning. The only way I can replace your heart of sorrows and regret is by you yielding to me and by my giving you a bigger vision of who I am and what I want to do in your life. Steph, if you could put the first slide up. So in the midst of a course I am doing at the moment, I found this little tool really helpful to understand what makes me today as a follower of Jesus. What are the primary factors in the making of the person that you see here before you? Now it could, and you may want to consider this for yourselves, it could be your DNA. Something about your family background. What was the family that you were born into? Were they significant in any particular way? What about your life experiences? Have they had a huge influence in shaping who you are today? What about your encounters with him? Those times when he's really met you and you hold them as treasured possessions. What about pushing through some of those times and those seasons in life when it was really tough and all you could do is just persevere and keep on pushing through? But you have done. You've done it. You've passed the test. You're standing strong. You're knowing his goodness and his favour. What about the hardships? How have you coped with the hardships that life has thrown you? Have they made you stronger? Have they softened your heart? Have they enabled you to receive his love? What about the favour of God? Are you skilled? Are you gifted in any particular way? What about your internal feelings? How do you feel about life and the mishmash and everything that's happened? Everything that's going around you. And what about some of the promises, or the words, the encouragements, or the scriptures which God may have given you? And I was just considering if Moses, should he stop to think about these? Well, family background, he was born into the tribe of Levi. His life experiences, well, they were preparing him to be an international negotiator, a man of authority. He may not have seen it or expected it at the time, but how different some of our life experiences may be that we see them as, and yet what God is preparing us for, what he is preparing for us to do, what he has up his sleeve, what he has on his heart for our future. What about the pushing through areas? 40 years he spent as a shepherd. Now, if he was a Jeff Blake type person, I'm sure he would have sneaked into the Exodus passages some of the fantastic stories he experienced as a farmer over all of those years. What about his encounters with God? Well, this is the first one we know of. And in part, it may look, well, it was just a bush that was burning. There was nothing particularly unusual necessary about that. Yeah, he's having a conversation with God. He thought as though God was saying something that he was hearing, and he's answering God back. But this was life transforming for him. He was never the same after this encounter with God. And that's what encounters with him can be like for each and every one of us. They can bring us to this place in life when we're transformed. And everything is different from that moment onwards. The favour on his life. Well, his mum saw that he was a fine child. So she decided to hide him for 3 months until either his features or the cries that he made or the size he grew to, I don't know what it was quite, she decided she couldn't hide him anymore. He was also experiencing the educational privileges of what it was like to be in that palace, enabling him to get a training and education many others wouldn't have had, enable him to write what is before us today. Not necessarily in the street version. His feelings, well, he wasn't very enthusiastic about this mission that God was calling him on at this particular time. Promises, scriptures, well, it all started when he was 80. He wouldn't, as far as I can see, there's nothing that happened, promises and scriptures and expectations before then. So if you're 78 or 79, who knows what may happen? Even if you're 80, the life that he has is still ahead for you. I wonder if Moses may have been thinking, oh, I'm just a shepherd. I've been doing this for 40 years. I imagine if you've been doing something for 40 years, day in, day out, in the back and the beyond of the desert, you may have something of potentially a more limited view of life. Your life may be coming in, maybe not. Maybe you just wonder at all of nature and all that was set before you, and you just absolutely love it. For me, I don't know if I'd cope for 40 years just being in a shepherd in the back of beyond. He may have thought, well, I'm quite experienced in failure, to be honest. I did have on my heart the people who I was born into, and there's one particular day when I tried to help them out. I tried to make a difference. It was a partial success because I got rid of one Egyptian, but then when it was all found out, he could have been living with that sense, I'm a failure. I've been there, I've done it, I've tried it before. It didn't work out. I wonder if he's thinking about those questions he's going to be asked when he went to the Israelites. Well, how did you come here, Moses? Where have you been all these years? Who gave you the authority to come and tell us what we should be doing? You haven't seen what we've been putting up with, what we've been living through this last 40 years. Who equipped you as an international negotiator? Where did you get your qualifications and experience from? If we were to consider the excuses that Moses had, it wasn't necessarily a really spectacular ending for that encounter that Moses had. There's actually 5 topics and 5 things that Moses says in response to God from the burning bush. And the first one is, who am I? Who am I that you should send me? The second one, he didn't really trust God's commands. But he did come out with a good question. Who shall I say has sent me? Whether he really meant to ask that question, I don't know. It'd be a bit frightening if you possibly saw a bush. You sometimes would just blurt out a bush that was on fire. You'd blurt out whatever's on your heart and mind. Well, who are you? Who shall I say has sent me? He got a really good answer. Well, it would do, from God. His next excuse, the third one, is, what if they don't believe me? His fourth one, I've never been good with words, neither before or after you spoke to me. And then his final one, after all that, please send someone else. And I wonder how often we may feel that. Please send someone else. When all along, he's wanting to send you. He's wanting to send me. What excuses do we have? And it didn't really end too well. Moses doesn't go into many details, but in Exodus 4, verse 14, we could read, the Lord's anger burned against Moses. I wonder what that looked like. Can you imagine if his anger burned against you? He'd seen a burning bush, so, God's got, he's on a day for burning things up, or just, for hot things. And he decides that, Moses, you can have a little bit of my burning. So it didn't start too well. But after that, Moses obeyed. He dusted himself down. He went away. He obeyed and followed. So you may think, well, life hasn't gone too well. Even the times when I did do something, try something, it didn't really work out. Let the past be in the past. Let him draw a line under it. Start to obey him today. And who knows where it may lead you. We can learn so much from our failings and when things don't go quite to plan. And for Moses, the qualification came in the calling. How often does he meet people in their everyday life? Saul, as he's on his way to Damascus to get rid of a few more Christians, met with a blinding light. Peter, as he was fishing. Moses, when he was a shepherd. Gideon, as he was hiding in the winepress. You could go on. These people who meet with him in the midst of everyday life. So what did the obedience look like for Moses? He went from there and he went back to Jethro. Interesting what he said to Jethro. Can I go and see if any of my people are still alive? I don't know if that meant he didn't have a lot of faith in that there would be people alive still, or whether he just thought that would be the easiest way for me to get away from my father-in-law for a little bit of time. But he went. But how good of God not only to prepare him, but also to prepare Aaron. I don't know what contact Aaron and Moses had over those years when they were apart. They wouldn't have had text and Facebook and Zoom as a way of keeping up one with another. Did they even know that they were alive? I don't know. But God spoke to Aaron as well and says, come on, brothers, meet one another up. Got things for you to do, places for you to go, people to experience, a purpose and a life worth living. And so began one of history's most precious and miraculous people movements, spearheaded by a God speaking from a burning bush and led by a couple of brothers aged 80 and 83. Don't ever think life's best days are behind you. John's hymns, we celebrated Pentecost a couple of weeks ago, and John's hymns, he's a director of rural ministries. He said of the coming of the Spirit, there is the experience first, then the awakening, and then the understanding, and then the sharing, which I think fits in quite well for Moses. He experienced something spectacular. Then there was the awakening in his heart and mind of what was taking place, and then the understanding, and then the sharing. So John says, I encourage you to read through the book of Acts, not necessarily as a prescriptive text, but as a story, a beautiful description of what it looks like for the Spirit to completely grab hold of someone and transform a life, transform our understanding of what it means to be human. How might Jesus be inviting a reimagining in your own life? May your prophetic imagination become alive and awake to possibility, restoration, and to the glorious pathways and encounters that lie in wait for the people of God. That's the beginning of Exodus. So God came and the fire was upon a bush. Now, post-Pentecost, the fire is to be upon us and within us. John the Baptist says of Jesus, he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. Yes, maybe now and again he will put his fire upon his bush. But how he longs to baptize and put his fire upon us and within us. And I noticed that the one small response that Moses made. In the Message version, it reads, he looked. Amplified, he turned aside to see. NIV, he gone over to look. So this bush is on fire, and he's just intrigued, he's wondering what it is. He made that move. He turned round. He went to have a look, what's happening? It was just such a small thing. Have you ever thought, what happened if he wouldn't have done that? Oh, it's just a bush on fire. Yeah, I've seen that every day. Off he goes. What happens in something of our everyday? He wants to speak. He's just waiting for us to nudge our hearts, knock on our door and just say, whisper something into our heart, and that we may make a move in our everyday as a result. Moses, twice his name was called out, was repeated. It's not that God didn't know where Moses was, or what he was like, or what was in his heart. And Moses' response was almost comical. Yes, I'm right here. Of course God knows where each and every one of us are at. But these holy moments that Moses has experienced, and Maddie, as many of us have heard of experienced, they're part of the intimacy of his calling and his equipping of us. And as we respond to the calling, one of the things that Maddie has said about this particular passage that she loves, it's just how God introduces himself, his name. I am who I am. And the number of times that you may have heard her say, she's just talked about that knowledge of God and who he is. And he's spoken to her about, you are because of who I am. And you're my daughter. And it'd be very easy, I think, for her as a 22-year-old to have a list of excuses why not to do this, why not to go where she's going. If we were to fast forward a couple of years into the journey that Moses has, I'm going to make two quick confessions here. For me, from my younger days, I didn't really like the Old Testament. When I first became a believer, my thought of God was, well, he's quite vengeful, and it's not a very pleasant Old Testament. But then Jesus comes along, shows us a different side of what God's like, and then he gets a little bit better. That was my possible view of it. But if we were to jump on into the life of Moses, Exodus 33, verse 11, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. What a difference in many ways. From a guy who had 5 excuses why not to respond and do what God wanted to, yet he obeyed And later, God calls him a friend. Wow, what a transformation. And then the next chapter, then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. What an encounter with God that must have been like. So I was trying to think, this last week or two, a few words to try and summarize that journey that Moses had been on. Life is so different when you are gripped and captured by his heart. From a New Testament point of view, I've got a good Father who loves me so much that he wants to give generously. And you too are being drawn into his generosity and purpose. His generosity has no limits. We can find our place in his family. Open the floodgates for the love of God to transform me. So Moses, reluctant to begin with, but obeyed, over time his heart would have opened up. His friendship with God would have deepened. And it's almost like the image I've got is of a young bird just mouth wide open when mum and dad come with some more food. Just that opening wide of expectancy. What a way to have our hearts positioned before him for all that he may want to give us. If only God would speak to me out of a burning bush, I'd be changed forever. I don't know if he would really. It still takes the obedience. It still takes the following him afterwards. It didn't change Moses instantly. The encounter, the calling itself is not enough. I've known friends with callings on their lives and haven't heard from them at all since. I don't know what happened. I don't know where they went in life. But in his calling, as Maddie is and will experience, is both the enabling, the empowering, and the equipping. For Jesus says, the Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life. I guess I have mentioned this verse before, but I am going to mention this again because it's precious to me. I can remember before I went to the Philippines in 1992, it was my first missions trip, and I just sensed God saying to me, Ian, out of Ephesians 3 verse 20, ask me to do immeasurably more than all you can ask, think, or imagine. And I did do that in the Philippines trip, and amazing things happened. And but I also can remember it was the first trip that Dr. Joy came on. Dr. Joy was 17 or 18 years old when she was called into missions. She cared for her mum and dad for most of her life, was involved in medicine, and at the age of 70, she joined her first missions trip to the Philippines that I was on. So she'd had 52, 53 years of waiting for a promise to be fulfilled before fulfilling her first missions trip. I think we had a cake on her 70th birthday in the south of Philippines around the same evening that a bomb went off 2 doors down the road when Islamic extremists were just starting one of their uprisings again within the Philippines. Didn't deter Dr. Joy at all. For the next 10 years, she went again to the Philippines, she went to Russia, she went to Ukraine, India, Israel, and she also joined us for a mission trip in Thailand. We gave her her first KFC in Bangkok. Didn't like that at all. Would much prefer the Thai hot food. What was interesting, we were going down the Burmese-Thai border, 5 of us. Karen was pregnant with Cara, and Dr. Joy, well into her 70s by now, and Karen and Joy were the only 2 who didn't get food poisoning. The other 3 of us were suffering from food poisoning as a result of down there. At the age of, in her 90s, having had one of her leg amputated, she went to the sea side. She wasn't happy for someone to go down to the shoreline and get a bucket of water and pour it onto her feet. She liked that. She wanted to be carried all the way to the shoreline so that she could dip her foot into the sea. She lived a life of joy. She knew what it was to live and serve him well into her 90s before being promoted to glory. Don't let anything hold you back. Don't let the regrets and disappointments stop whatever God may want to do in you in the days ahead. Someone somewhere is crying out. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob responds to cries, comes down and meets with Moses. I want you to go. I want you to make a difference. And if you could put up slide 2, Steph, please. This is Pattaya. Looks like a lovely city. Oh, yes, if you saw that in a brochure, you might think, oh, I'd love to go there. That looks like all those sandy beaches, and it's quite a different story inside the city. The 3rd slide. In the 1960s, it was a fishing village of 100 families. When we were there in the year 2000, it had 3 million tourists visited. By 2024, there were 28 million tourists visiting this place every year. Imagine the infrastructure, the development, all that must take place for a 1960s fishing village of 100 families to suddenly have 28 million tourists all those years later. Chinese, Malaysians, Russians, South Koreans, Indians. For Moses, it wasn't just for one person he went. 600,000 men, and then there were the women and the children as well. A people movement, people change, cultural changing events. Don't limit what he may want to do. The Pattaya Mail is a local English newspaper. I'm coming towards the end. And this is what it reads. A few contrasting and conflicting stories, really. Once a dream destination filled with exotic promise and genuine hospitality, Pattaya is now witnessing a quiet but noticeable exodus of European tourists. For decades, these travellers were some of Thailand's most loyal visitors, but now many are walking away and they may not be coming back. Pattaya, it's a city which has been replaced, chasing quick money and tolerating bad behaviour. And yet they can also say, in Europe, the lager-lout types used to go to Spain, party all night, and fight with their shadow. Now they've discovered Thailand. I can remember the Sunday before I was commissioned. I think it was just me as a single person before I went off to mission the first time. Some of you know Anne Widdicombe, yeah? Anne Widdicombe, famous for her dancing, but also famous or maybe infamous as an MP, and for her standing for what she believed to be right and what she believed to be proper and true. Quite a controversial figure in many ways, but she was willing to stand. Her husband, Malcolm, was an Anglican vicar in Bristol, where I was sent from. And I can remember when that Sunday before I went, Malcolm told a story. And the story was of a missionary many, many years ago. And it's one of those days in mission where you were sent out, you may even prepare your coffin, you may prepare all of your possessions because you weren't likely to come back. So this missionary had gone off, and they did come back. They were much worse for wear, and they were disfigured. They were a shadow of the person that went out. And what they thought they'd do is they'd go into the church service one Sunday morning, the church that they were a part of, went in, no one recognized them, and no one knew who they were. No one really spoke to them because they were, they were looking a little bit unusual. There's no prayer for missions. There was no mention of what was happening in the local community. And they thought, well, maybe this is how I am like I am. And Malcolm's encouragement to the church in Bristol that particular Sunday morning was, Ian is going on a rope. He's at the end of the rope. Your job is to hold the rope for Ian, that he may come back. Now, you guys, I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of Maddie, you've been fantastic in your support for her, your love for her, your care for her, for all the years that we've been a part of here. I know she wants to say thank you. And I know you'll hold the rope for her. I know your prayers will make a difference. But for you, as you consider the God who's able to do immeasurably more than all we ask, think, or imagine, as you prepare for your encounter with him, will you pray and ask that he will do that for you, so that he can meet you in your retirement, in your teaching, in your school's work, in your cooking, in the cleaning, whatever it may be, that afresh he may move and do some amazing, miraculous things like we heard about.